We are at Mammoth Caves in Kentucky. This is the largest underground cave system in the world. Largest cave system in the world. Over 400 miles of caves. So we're gonna go and check out. There's a lot more going on here than I thought. There's a bunch of houses and old buildings. So we're gonna start at the visitor center and then go from there. All right, stay tuned.
We won't be seeing 426 miles of Mammoth Cave. How is 2 miles of Mammoth Cave? Woo! But over the next 2 hours, accompanied by about 540 stairs on this tour. Does that sound good to y'all? Woo! Sounds good to me. Folks, I'll be your lead ranger today. My name is Ranger Quentin. You can call me Ranger Quentin. You can call me Ranger. I also respond to help. So any way to get my attention, just please let me know. But to give you a summary of what we'll be doing this morning, in our first about 45 minutes to an hour of our tour, will be a nice wide open passageways for the first 45 to an hour of our tour. That will all change at the Giant's Coffin. At the Giant's Coffin, we're going to leave those nice big passageways behind. We're going to go into much smaller passageways. Areas where you're going to have to watch your head, watch your step a whole lot more. We'll go across 2 pits today. We'll go across side saddle pits that's about 42 feet deep. We'll then go across the bottomless pits. Folks, this is the only bottomless pit in the entire world with a light at the very bottom. Oh yes. Well, it is 105 feet today. We found the bottom, but from there we can continue on to my favorite area of the cave, called Fat Man's Misery. Fat Man's Misery is a keyhole-shaped passageway, but I want you to imagine the shape of a mushroom. It's nice and wide at the top, but nice and skinny down the middle. And as you go through there, you're going to have to turn sideways because the passageway will be as narrow as your legs. We'll shimmy through there for 200 feet. Then we get to Tall Man's Agony. Tall Man's Agony is along Fat Man's Misery. The ceiling will stay the same, but the floor will come up. And when you step up into there, we'll be about like this for about 25 feet. We'll then make our way into Great Relief Hall, because it'll be a great relief to stand up again. We'll make our way down into River Hall, 310 feet underground, and whatever goes down must come back up. We'll make our way up and out of an area called Mammoth Dome. Mammoth Dome is truly breathtaking. It's 170 feet tall, but the most breathtaking portion is how you'll get out. Because there is 155 stairs we have to transcend. And when you get to the top, you'll agree it'll be the most breathtaking portion of the cave tour. But from there, we'll make walking passageway out of the cave, walking out the same area we walked in, through the historic entrance, out the historic entrance. So basically a whole loop through the cave. Does that sound good to y'all? Yeah. Sounds good to me. If none of that scared you off, here's the health and safety and resource protection. We have to go over all of this before the cave tour, so listen up to me carefully. If you have heart or breathing problems, trouble walking long distances, climbing stairs, or any other health concerns, please consider your limitations and before going into a dark hole in the ground. Evacuation from Mammoth Cave will, and has taken several hours. Folks, you came out here to the middle of nowhere, Kentucky, and we're going underneath it. So if anything was to happen down underground, it will, and has taken several hours to evacuate people from the cave system. So please consider any health, physical, or limitations you may have before joining onto this tour this morning. In fact, if you feel like you're going to need a slower pace of walking throughout this tour, stay up front with me. The slowest pace will be at the very front. If you want more of a faster or steadier pace, stay a little bit more towards the back of our group. That way, slowest in the front have a nice, comfortable pace. Folks in the back can keep the group together. Sound good? Sounds good. Cave is dimly lit. Shocker. Cave is dimly lit, folks. Trails may be uneven or wet at times. Ceiling could be low. So please watch your head, watch your step when going throughout the cave today. In fact, if you are underneath the age of 16, raise your hand for me. Take that hand, put it on the parent or guardian that forced you to be here today. That is as far as you want to be from your parents and guardians, staying within arm's reach of them at all times. No exception. You're good, kiddos, but no weapons, tobacco, e-cigarettes, vaping, selfie sticks, tripods, monopods, food or drink other than water is not allowed down inside the cave. Also, no child backpack carriers or carrying children on your shoulders. Because while you might duck down, your child may not. And that will cause a whole nother set of problems. But stay on the trails. Don't step, climb, or sit on any of the rocks or lint rails. And also, are we going to touch, write, or mark on the walls of the cave or the ceiling? No, we want to keep it as is. As oils from our hands can permanently stain those rocks over time. The only two exceptions is if you start to fall or need to stabilize yourself, feel free to touch that wall. And the second exception is fat man's misery and tall man's agony. It is okay to touch the cave through there because there is no way to avoid it. No flash photography. Take photos, make memories here at Mammoth Cave. Just make sure that flash is off on your phones or cameras. If you don't know how to do that, find any youngster that just raised their hand. They'll be more than happy to help you. But at the end of our tour, when we come out the historic entrance, we're going to walk across some nice squishy mats, just cleaning off the bottoms of our shoes of a disease called white nose syndrome. It's a fungal disease that affects bats, but doesn't affect us humans. We're just trying to prevent that from going to any future places we may go to. If you see any wildlife down there, leave them where they are. We're going into their home today. We want to be respectful to them, especially bats. Because bats are mammals, and they could carry diseases that transfer over to us, such as rabies. So if you see a bat today, don't touch it, pet it, kiss it, or chew on it. But if you do come in contact with a bat, find either me or my good partner, Ranger Greg, in the back, and we'll have some nice government-issued paperwork for you afterwards. Any questions at all before we head on down? Any questions at all? So the actual tour in total is 2 miles. A little over half a mile is here on the surface. It's a quarter mile down to the entrance, quarter mile out. As far as inside the cave, it's about 1.5 miles in total inside the cave.
Actually, I meant the duration.
2 hours. In fact, shall we start out, folks?
So we're about to head down into Mammoth Cave, folks. We're right here at the historic entrance to Mammoth Cave. Yes, historically, people have been going down into this entrance right here for the past 5,000 years now, dating back to the late archaic, early woodland Native Americans that would have been first going down into the cave system. But 5,000 years ago is just an arbitrary number, unless you just have something to compare it with. So think of it more like this. About 4,800 years ago, the pyramids of Egypt were just starting to be built. People have been going into Mammoth Cave longer than the pyramids of Egypt have even existed. That is how much Mammoth Cave has really had a grip on mankind. That sense of adventure and curiosity throughout time. We'll talk about that all throughout this cave tour. But about 2,000 years ago, they stopped. We don't know why, but we do know this, that modern man found Mammoth Cave again into the 1790s. And unlike the first Native Americans to ever go inside, they would use Mammoth Cave in a different purpose. Instead of that sense of adventure and curiosity, what they could use the cave for. Now, exactly what that use for of the cave we'll talk about at our first stop inside the cave. But actually, you need something that those early Native Americans did not need at all. A ticket. So have your tickets ready for Ranger Greg. As you pass by him, he'll check your tickets. and follow me into Mammoth Cave. So if you will, let's head on down.
Dad, you might want to stop.
Folks, on that historic tour, we're continuing to the left. Come on in. Come on in. As we were passing through the rotunda back there, that first large room we just passed through, you may have seen as soon as we entered into the room, off to our right, those kind of two stone memorials there on our right. Those actually date back, both of those, the one that you immediately came up to, the one on the right, that was put in by the American Legion in 1922, the one on the left by the American War Mothers in 1929. They are actually memorials to veterans and soldiers of World War I, also to their families back home as well. Those were placed down inside the cave because they knew by the 1920s that Mammoth Cave was eventually going to become a national park into the foreseen future. So if you put those memorials into the cave, they would forever and always be down here in the cave itself. Also, the reason these memorials are even down here is just the dates. 1922, 1929, I see you, Ranger Greg. But imagine, if you put up those monuments up at a courthouse or such, they would have been covered in moss, lichen. They wouldn't have been readable. But down here inside the cave, they look brand new. The American Legion one even has in the stone base of it the names of fallen soldiers from over 39 states of the United States at that time, so that their names are never forgotten and always here at Mammoth Cave, so that they are never forgotten into the foreseen future. Folks, Mammoth Cave has a lot of an in-depth history into it. In fact, where we're going to start today, well, before we start, folks, I can officially welcome all of y'all into Mammoth Cave. You are now in the longest cave system on Earth, folks. But the first modern people, frontiersmen, that were coming out here to Kentucky, they didn't know that this would eventually become the longest cave system on Earth. Mammoth Cave was found around 1798. And when they found this cave, it wasn't for that sense of adventure, as I mentioned on the surface, but instead, what they could use the cave for. But not what's in the walls. Not in the walls of the cave. They weren't interested in that. Instead, they were interested in the dirt. They were interested on what they could find within the dirt inside the cave. Because they knew there was bacteria and bat guano or bat poop that fertilized into the dirt, brought nitrates into the mix. Those frontiersmen,
They knew transforming those nitrates into the dirt, they could transform that into something else called saltpeter. Saltpeter is the main ingredient in black gunpowder. So finding this resource out here in the West was hugely beneficial for protecting their households and putting food on the table. But at first, it was a small mom and pop operation right at the entrance. But by 1810, 1811, that all changed into what you're seeing right behind me today. And even what you saw in the rotunda, that first large room. Because if you looked in the middle of the room, did y'all see those strange looking boxes in the middle? Yeah. If you didn't, that's also okay, because there's 5 more up ahead. These big boxes, think of them as huge coffee filters. They were called leaching vats. Think if you make Chemex coffee or drip coffee. You take your filter, your coffee grounds, you put it into that filter, you pour water over the top of it, and it leaches down through the bottom. That's essentially what was happening in these boxes. They would collect dirt from within the cave, bring it back to those boxes, and pipe in water into the cave. These are 2 poplar trees, the state tree of Kentucky, hollowed out, connected together, with one end sharpened like a pencil, the other end concaved to connect these logs together, streaming water all the way into the cave to the 5 boxes up ahead and back. That's why there's 2 pipes. The one on the bottom to bring water into the cave. The other one to send it right back outside to furnaces and kettles to boil down, evaporate that water away, but leaving those saltpeter crystals there at the very end. And that was the simplest way for me to explain that, because it was hugely complicated, but one that was deeply needed, especially in the year of 1812. Our old friends, Great Britain, weren't finished with us. They started taking sailors off of our ships, impressing them into the British Navy instead. We weren't going to have that. So we declared war on Great Britain again in the year of 1812. Now, folks, this is my first tour today. I've only had 1 cup of coffee. I can't remember the name of that war in 1812. Does anyone else remember? Let's just call it the War of 1812. We went back to war with Great Britain in Mammoth Cave and countless caves throughout this region. We're manufacturing saltpeter for the war efforts. In Mammoth Cave alone, out of every 3 rifles that was shot, 1 of them was using saltpeter made around here where we're standing. Hugely beneficial for our freedom, but not to the freedom of the men that were working this operation. Up to 70 enslaved men working towards a freedom they possibly never got to see. And if they did, it was over 5 decades later, 50 years later, before they could enjoy any such of those freedoms. If there's anything to remember about this operation, it's those young men. Because by the end of the war, in 1815, after the Battle of New Orleans with Colonel Jackson, the price of saltpeter plummets from about $1 per pound to about 5 to 10 cents per pound. None of this was profitable anymore, but they left it behind. In case they needed it again, they could come back to it. That's why it's still here, 213 years later, still standing before you, the original remnants of that operation. Those young men were sent back down south
with none of their names or stories ever written down, truly lost to history. But their history here at Mammoth Cave is never lost, still standing into the forefront of today. But the owners of Mammoth Cave at that time, they had to think, what are we going to do with this great big hole in the ground now? And they got a crazy idea. I still don't understand it. But they thought that maybe, just maybe, people would travel halfway across the country, maybe the world, to come out here to the middle of nowhere, Kentucky, and with their hard-earned money, follow two complete strangers into a dark hole in the ground and pay them for it. Folks, I still don't understand y'all. Y'all have been coming back ever since 1816. 207 years of cave tourism has happened here at Mammoth Cave. And every single one of you folks now join into that history here at Mammoth Cave. And actually, our next stop up ahead, talking about those early tours at Mammoth Cave, how it would have looked, and even who would have been leading your cave tour.
For more than
We may see bats today. It's all depending on them. But you gotta think of it like this. For over the past, 5,000 years, people have been coming into this cave through a lot of the natural entrances that we still use today. Imagine yourself. You're asleep at home, you're in bed, all the lights are off, sound asleep. Then someone comes in, turns on all the lights, starts talking really loudly. You don't want to stay there. Bats are the same way. They have learned where we frequent and stay away from those areas of the cave. Here in Kentucky, we don't have many whales. So we had to change the fuel out to something else that we have a lot more of. That was bacon grease and lard. We have a lot of that here. So you would start off your chore at that time, up at the hotel, eating a big breakfast of country ham, bacon, sausage links, maybe some biscuits and gravy. And all the while you were eating your breakfast, the cave guides were going into the kitchen and filling up your lanterns with that fresh kitchen grease. So the whole time, your chore just smelled like Cracker Barrel the entire time. Now, I say, would y'all like to go back in time? It was a little hesitant, but I heard a yes. You might not see much right now, but that's because our eyes were adjusted to that big light that was all around. This was their light. They had two chore options when you first came here. Say that the year is 1839. You had two options. You had the short chore and the long chore. The short chore, so if you walked 6 hours through the cave, be ready to turn around and walk the 6 hours back. Because it was a two and back. Cave chores, people came from all over the world. Folks just like yourselves, the rich, the wealthy, and the famous. And they were coming out here to Mammoth Cave to really see the cave. Owners of the cave, their wives, and even their sons were the first cave guides through Mammoth Cave. But in 1838, that had all changed. A gentleman named Franklin Gore purchased the cave in 1838 for $5,000. With him, he brought a new guide force to Mammoth Cave. of enslaved men, such as Stephen Bishop, Matt Bransford, and Nick Bransford. Stephen, Matt, and Nick. These three men would put Mammoth Cave on the map the world round, especially Stephen. Stephen Bishop, we suppose he was around the age of 17, 18 when he came here in 1838, told to lead these rich white folks throughout the cave. But Stephen realized something. Is down inside the cave, the one that was in charge was him. He knew the way out. The visitors did not. So they had to listen to him. It was the first time in his life, in both Matt and Nick, that people actively listened to what he had to say. Stephen would go on to learn knowledge from all over the world. And he would go out and see as much of the cave as possible. In fact, he would lead one gentleman in 1838 to places no one had ever visited before, across an area called the Bottomless Pit. He was given a handful of cash. Stephen grabbed the ladder, threw it across the bottomless pit, because they didn't know how deep it was, no matter how many rocks or burning pieces of newspaper. They never saw the bottom. But that didn't stop Stephen. Stephen crossed that ladder on his hands and knees with the lantern in his teeth. I can only imagine the fear that he may have had. But on the other side, his was the first footprints to ever be on that side of the cave. Truly incredible. But we can only imagine going through the cave. You see, the cave's a dangerous place. Using light like this, one gust of wind, one drop of water.
Go on.
What do you mean authentic?
It means a real.
Like tourists?
Tourists, guides, people of the past. Look at that whole wall right behind you.
Oh, wow.
We're going to see a whole lot through here.
So this is the kind of research you do. Come and check this stuff out.
Exactly.
Did they used to like string ropes or something so they could find their way out?
No. It was all about memorizing.
We don't want to. Is that sand up there?
Dirt. This is all kind of red clay dirt, red clay dirt and soil from the surface.
Oh my God, are we getting down?
Oh, yes. You signed up for this.
Imagine coming down here with your whale lantern. Oh yeah, let's go on down.
We'll pause here just for a moment.
Was that Fat Man's Misery?
No, that was the Stairs of Time. We're going to pass by Side Salad Pit, Bottomless Pit. Then we're going to get to Fat Man's Misery and Tall Man's Agony.
Okay.
I'll give you a hint. There may be a sign.
Oh,
Might be a sign. Does not taste like butterscotch. Over here. No.
Is this your
Welcome to Mammoth Dome. Don't forget to look up. There's the stairs.
Look at this kid.
Not quite, but very close. Against it, while limestone is chemically eroded away, such as slightly acidic rainwater. So as rainwater goes through the soil, instead of penetrating through that sandstone, it moves off the side, not penetrating through to limestone underneath. That's why you don't see many stalactites, stalagmites. The water's not penetrating through, dripping through the cave. Because otherwise, what would happen is those formations would slowly grow together over time, making it rock solid again over time. That's why Mammoth Cave is the longest cave, because we don't have many of those stalactites being formed. But in areas where there are cracks in that sandstone and water's able to come down through and get to the limestone, we get plenty of cave formations, such as our Domes and Dripstones tour or Frozen Niagara tour. Through there's one single formation that's 45 feet wide and 35 feet tall, called the Frozen Niagara. So there are plenty of areas inside the cave that do have those cave formations. Take a look as we pass by.
Do you think they were exploring it?
To our left is the bottomless pit. It is 105 feet deep. As you cross the bridge, you can look beneath your feet. If you're scared of heights, don't. Oh, yes.
Is this a loop or an outline?
You okay? Watch your step.
Is it really slippery?
Yeah,
First step
just
is-
hold on.
It's damp.
The water's still getting in here.
What's your hat?
It's just standing up straight.
I'm just chilling here. Man's misery.
There you go.
told you, there might be a sign.
Yeah.
I wonder if they have to tell people they can't come in because they're literally too big. They won't fit.
I don't know.
Super narrow.
No wonder they made this part of the tour because it's so dynamic.
So cool. Yeah.
I don't feel like adventure if you do stuff like this.
You're
Feels like a real experience.
Can you capture that or no? With the camera.
Oh, me?
Can we capture it?
I'm not sure.
We're going to stop for one second. No, this way.
Oh, wow. I feel like I'm in Disneyland.
Got it smelling super good down here, Johnny.
Is that a bathroom?
That's the bathroom.
It smells neat.
Try to keep it clean for you.
So there is a pump station 280 feet above us. They pipe down water down here. Whatever waste gets pumped straight back up. Decommissioned U.S. Forest Service fire tower that was first in Mammoth Dome. The problem with that fire tower was whatever side had the most weight would lean to that side. So it was constantly doing this the entire time you walked up. Not great. But they changed it out in 2006. So for 49 years, people went up and down right through there. That tower was put in 2006 now. Oh yes. It's actually going to be our last stop inside the cave before we head back outside. So as we're gathering back up again, any last questions, curiosities still on your mind? So we're back to about 140 feet underground right now. Back when we were just back at the benches back there, that was our lowest point underground at about 310 feet. So at our lowest point, we basically had a 30-story building above our heads. But we're 140 feet underground right now. Any others? Yes?
So mine are two like human logistical things. First question is, we're probably all wondering, and it's kind of very embarrassing to ask, but would they pack in, pack out their bathroom, their restroom?
Yes.
So they would just go in here?
Yes.
Okay, I was curious.
So the way it would go is just on shore. If you needed to use the restroom, you just found a big rock, you just went behind it.
Okay.
Hence why we say, don't go off trail. You don't know what you may find. Did you say you had another
Yeah,
one?
second question, I was really curious, like, logistically, when they would come in to explore, would they, like, pack food for days and they would stay in here? And what source did they use for lighting back then during the excavation?
Yeah, so as far as food is concerned, on shores, they would pack in the food with them.
Okay.
So along those couple hours, say if you're going on the long tour, 12 to 16 hours, there would have been 2 cave guides like me and Ranger Greg today. Except the Ranger Greg would have been carrying a big picnic basket that had a blanket in it, fried chicken, biscuits, cornbread, had wine, bourbon, and even some milk in there as well. And they would eat that inside the cave.
What about the explorers? Like, would they come in here for weeks?
The thing is, they wouldn't come in for weeks because the explorers were you. The visitors were the explorers. If you were on, think of back to that story of Stephen Bishop. The visitor asked Stephen, hey, I want to go somewhere no one had ever seen before. That's when they crossed the bottomless pit, went into new areas. Most of the areas of the cave, the names that we see or talk about, were names that visitors came up for those areas of the cave. Many domes, think like there's one area inside the cave called Thorpe's Pit.
Thorpe's Pit was just the name of one of the visitors that was on that tour that found that pit. So many names inside the cave just came from you. As far as staying weeks underground, doesn't happen. As far as in today's concern, it's a quick in and out. Many trips inside the cave may stay overnight inside the cave, but they won't spend the night. They won't sleep inside the cave because they want to get into the area they're searching, researching, and getting out afterward. So before the stair, like right here in Mammoth Dome, so before that staircase was put in, there was no way to get up and out of there. Once they came into Mammoth Dome, they began with Stephen. When Stephen and that first tour group came in there, they looked around, checked it out, and they went back the way they came in. Back through Fat Man's Misery, back to the Giant's Coffin, and back out the way that they originally came in. First staircase put in 1957. That staircase we just came up, put in 2006. So down at our last stop, where we were at the benches, you may have seen those measuring gauges on the sides. Those are flood gauges. Because when water floods from the Green River, it back floods into the cave. So those height measurements are there. So when it floods, we don't have to have someone come down the big measuring stick and go into the water. We can just look at those flood gauges and see, oh, it rose 57 feet inside the cave. Last time any flooding got into River Hall down there was March 1st of 2021. The waters flooded in there about 45 feet. That was enough to flood over all the benches that we were just sitting on, or at least y'all were sitting on just a couple minutes ago.
Well, that wraps up our Mammoth Cave tour. Quentin was amazing. Knew his stuff because he grew up half an hour away from here. But that was so much fun and interesting. I've always wanted to see this national park. So if you're in Kentucky,
continue on Mammoth Cave Parkway.
Go see Mammoth Cave National Park. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.